Hey, Snowbeck Civic students, here we go. We're going to start off with talking about who votes. The voting requirements for the United States are 18 years old, citizen of the United States, and a resident of the state that you're voting in. So you have to be a citizen of the United States. If you're a documented or undocumented worker or person, you would not be able to vote. If you have a felony in most states, that you won't be able to vote. If you're in jail, I should say. Many states, once you get out of jail, you can vote, or once you're done with parole, you can vote, but it's different state by state because remember, voting rights are a state's right, a reserved power. One of the topics in recent elections has been voter ID. Some states, like Minnesota, do not require voter ID. Those are the gray states on this slide. The green ones are non-strict photo ID. So you maybe you have to have a photo ID or you have to ID, but it doesn't have to be a photo ID. But the really strict states are the bluish, purplish colors here. They have much more strict standards. It is a question about access. Some states want to make it easy to vote, to get as many people as possible to vote. Other states are more focused on, hey, we want to make sure there's not fraudulent votes or votes that are illegal. So that's a question that we actually have discussions in class, but we'll save that for class time. So in the end, what we want to talk about here today is how do we figure out who's going to be the nominee for the Republican and the Democratic candidates for office, right? Going into election, there might be 20 Republicans that are interested in running for president and 20 Democrats. We want to narrow it down to one. Why? Because if you have multiple candidates from each party running for election, they're going to steal votes from people that have really like ideas. So there's two ways that states do figure out who their nominee is going to be. One is a caucus and one is primary. Minnesota was a former caucus state. We actually are primaries on election years and caucuses on non-election years. It's unique for our state. Well, let's talk about caucus in general. Caucuses are where groups of people get together and they discuss ideas. So when there's a caucus, a state like Iowa has meetings in your neighborhoods, in your precincts broken down into neighborhoods. And people from that neighborhood, from the Democratic Party get together, and people from that neighborhood and the Republican Party get together. And they talk about issues, those party planks that we mentioned before. Healthcare, taxes, infrastructure spending, marriage laws. Anyways, they talk about those issues and then they write up ideas that they want on the party platform. So they write up the plank, and that plank would go from the precinct to the county to the state and then on to the national party. Then the other thing that they do in caucuses is vote. Vote for who they want to support for their party. So if the 20 Republican candidates, you get in your room, you talk over all the candidates, and then you vote for who you want. The cool thing about caucuses is you're working with people that are like-minded. You're discussing the issues and discussing the actual candidates. The hard part about caucuses is it takes several hours. So if you want to go and vote in your caucus, you might be there for several hours. So that's the drawback of a caucus. A primary is pretty much like an election for office, right? You go and vote and you leave. You're not there all day or all night like a caucus is. So there's two types of primaries. There's a closed primary. So in the closed primary, if you're a Republican, when you walk in, you have to say, hey, I'm Mitch Snowbeck, I'm a Republican, and then they look on the Republican actual people that are registered Republicans, and then they go, okay, you're registered Republican, here is your ballot. Or if you walk in and say, hey, I'm Mitch Snowbeck, I'm a Democrat, they look on the Democrats' registered voters that are Democrats, and then they give you a Democrat ballot. So you're stuck to the party that you are registered for. An open primary is I just walk in and say, hey, I want to vote on the Republican ballot or I want to vote on a Democratic ballot. There are some variants. Some are partially closed and partially open primaries. So it's different state by state. Hey, why don't you search it? Go out there and search different type of primaries in the United States and you can see what states do. Minnesota is an open primary, so you can choose the ballot that you want. So different states have different rules for the primary and caucuses. Many have winner take all. So if you're looking at an election and there's candidate A, B, and C, candidate A gets 50% of the vote, candidate B 40%, and candidate C 10%. Winner take all system is in this, let's say the state of Minnesota, the winner is candidate A. That candidate would get all the delegates. Delegates are kind of like electoral votes. Those delegates then would go to the national convention and vote for you to be the representative of your party. Other states have proportional representation. Candidate A gets 50% of those delegates. Candidate B would get 40%, and then candidate C would get 10%. So it's not winner take all. Okay. So front end loading is something that you'll read about in the book. But front loading is this. Actually, primaries start in January and they end in the late summer. So there's a long time where different states have their primaries and caucuses. So what many states started to do is move their primaries and caucuses earlier. And the reason why they started to do that is they felt like their states weren't getting a say in the election. So, halfway through the primary and caucus season, January, February, March, April, May rolls by, and then we already have the candidates chosen for the Democrats and Republicans. So many states are like, hey, we want a say in that, so they started front-end or moving their actual primaries and caucuses earlier in the year. In the state of Minnesota, it is really easy to register to vote. When you go from getting your provisional driver's license to when you turn 18 to regular driver's license, you can register to vote right there and then, so as you fill out your paperwork. Otherwise, you can register online in the state of Minnesota. The form is really easy. You can actually have same-day registration in the state of Minnesota. So when you go in to vote, you can actually register and vote on the same day. So it is really easy to register in the state of Minnesota. Other states have more restrictions. Minnesota has taken the route is that we want to get as many people as possible voting, as long as they have the required documents to do so. As I mentioned previously, some allow you to register at the day of the election. Minnesota is one of them. You need to find where you need to go to vote, though, your actual polling place. It's where you go to vote, and it's called a precinct. So the easiest way to find out where your precinct is you go on to the state of Minnesota's Secretary of State website. So type in Minnesota Secretary of State in a search engine. You'll get it. There's a tab that says where do I vote? You click on it, you type in your address, and boom, it says you're going to vote at Northfield Elementary, or the fire station, or a church in your local area. So that's how you figure out your precinct of where you go to vote. Here's an example. You still can get paper voter registration applications, but like I said, you can do it in person on the day you vote. You can do it when you get your license, or you can do it online. It's a real simple way to do it. Here's an example of previous precincts. This has changed, but it gives you an idea. You can see this is the city of Eagan, and you can figure out where you live and what square you live in, or what precinct you live in. If you live in P7, then you go and you can figure out where that voting place is located. So best way to do it is to go to the Secretary of State's website and type in your address. So here is the actual proposed polling locations at that point that we just looked at. So you can look, I was precinct 1, I would go to Pilot Knob Elementary School. Precinct 2 goes to Eagan Community Center. Precinct 4 goes to Cedar School. 5A goes to Oak Hills Church. So you can get the idea where you go to vote. Just a few terms to wrap up with. It's not done the same in every state, voting in general. Remember, elections and how states vote are not included in the Constitution, so it's a reserved power under Amendment number 10. So different states choose how they vote. Some states could force you to vote straight ticket, Republican or Democrat. Most states allow split ticket where you can choose either one. A big issue along with voter ID is absentee ballots. And many states have gone to allow everybody to do an absentee ballot. You don't have to have a reason to do it. Like I'm going to be on vacation or out of the state when the election's occurring, or I'm in the military. In the past, absentee ballots, you'd had to have strict reasons for being gone. Now they've allowed early voting through absentee ballots in many states, and Minnesota is one of them. So if you wanted to go and fill out a form, they could mail you a ballot, or you could show up at City Hall, fill out a form, and they give you a ballot. Then you could vote and either send it in the mail or return it to City Hall. So many states have chosen to do it that way, feeling like getting the most people is very important. Concerns about absentee ballot is there voter fraud? There hasn't been much proven with absentee ballots yet, but that's the concern about allowing people to vote early. Because they're concerned that people could maybe steal ballots. But there hasn't been much evidence of that. Finally, exit poll. After you vote, as you walk out the doors of your precinct, sometimes they'll have pollers there, and the pollers are finding out who's winning the election or who's leading the election. They'll say, who did you vote for? And then they keep track of it, and then they report it on the news. So that's just an exit poll, just a term mentioned in this unit. This is the actual ballot for the state of Minnesota. This is what it looks like when you show up to vote or you get delivered in your mail. It lists all the candidates. This is not for a primary or a caucus, it's actual election. And you can see this is from 2012, but you have Mitt Romney, Republicans, Barack Obama, Democrats, but you can see there's so many other political parties that are even on the ballot. The Libertarian Party, the Socialist Party, the Constitutional Party. You'll even see some years there's the Communist Party on here. They have candidates that are running. But it's pretty simple. You get a marker, you fill in your dots, then you return it to the machine, and then you run it to the machine, and that counts your votes. They're tallied. I think it's really important to emphasize that your vote matters. I always say the world is run by people that show up, people that run for office, people that vote, choosing those people to go to office, or to control a position in Congress, the president or governor. So the word apathy means there's many people that go, oh, my vote doesn't matter. There's millions of people in the state of Minnesota, my vote doesn't matter. Or the Democrats always win my precinct, or the Republicans always win my precinct. I want to argue that your vote does matter, and you need to get out and vote, because if you believe passionately about issues or certain topics, you need to vote for people that agree with you. Otherwise, a small group of people are picking our leaders, and I'd rather have a large group of people and have our representatives represent who we are as a state or a precinct. Or as a nation. So I think it's important that you go and vote, why? Because it makes a difference in the decisions that are being made by our country and our elected officials. So just one last reminder, elections are the jobs of states. It's a reserved power, and that's why it differs from state to state. Hopefully you got an idea of who votes and how soon you can vote. Most of you guys, by the time you're seniors, in 2024, we'll be able to vote for President of the United States in the next election. Make sure you're reading the book and preparing for your next test. Have a great day.